What's up, folks? Mike for CMCC Builds here to take a nuanced approach to the recurring hot topic, the monk's power level. Are they good? Are they terrible? Somewhere in between? Some of you may have noticed in my Batman build here, I took some shots at the monk's abilities, especially key in the fact that nearly everything a monk can do pulls from the same limited pool. And early in the monk's career, it's a very limited pool. But that's just one aspect of what a monk can do. And the question itself, is a particular class good or bad, is extraordinarily broad, general, and unfocused. It's very difficult to answer to the point that it almost becomes entirely opinion based, which is fine, but I like to have more concrete questions and answers whenever possible. Today's video attempts to do just that. Here we're going to answer the specific question, how do monks stack up in terms of damage per round, or DPR? And to answer that question, we're going to look at 8 different builds. That's right, 8. 2 of which will be powerful monk builds from the Mercy and Shadow Monk subclasses. 5 of the builds will be easily optimized martial builds. Many will be classic 5e optimized archetypes such as the Polearm Master Paladin or the Ranged Battle Master. And then we'll use that standard Eldritch Blast plus Agonizing Blast plus Hex Warlock as our baseline to see if 1, the monks can beat the baseline, and 2, if so, how do they compare to the cream of the crop, so to speak, of optimized martial builds. And very quickly, I define martial build to mean any character who uses their action primarily to use a weapon. Some people define martial as a character that doesn't cast spells. That's not my definition. It's not the one I use here, and I personally don't find that definition useful in any capacity since literally every single class in the game can cast spells, even if some of the base classes can't. I mean, is an Eldritch Knight really not a martial character because it casts spells? A paladin? Of course they are. Now, even the question of monk's DPR comes with a major caveat. And that is the fact that a huge part of what monks do is facilitate improvements in DPR to other characters. Take, for example, the monk's most popular ability, Stunning Strike. Stunning Strike might allow the monk character to get advantage on several attacks over the next round, which can have a decent bump of 10 to 20 points for those 2 turns, but the real advantage of this feature is to shut down that enemy for an entire turn and provide advantage to every single other player who chooses to attack that creature. Now that 10 to 20 points can be massive for something like a Great Weapon Master, Polearm Master, Paladin, who benefits hugely from advantage on 3 attacks while taking the -5 attack plus 10 damage feature. Not to mention the increased crit chance and the effect there on Paladin Smites. That's 1 additional character. A party may have 3, 4, 5, or more additional characters. With the right party, a stunned enemy can meet a dead enemy by that monk's next turn. And that shows up as only 10 points of additional damage or just over 1 DPR when averaged out. The point here is that DPR can't capture this, and it's not meant to capture this. So it's important for us to fully understand what that DPR number means. Now you may be saying, for Stunning Strike specifically, well yeah, but the chance to land a Stunning Strike is pretty small. How much of a factor is this really? I was firmly in this camp until I ran the numbers. The chance of landing a Stunning Strike can be low. It's a DC based off the monk's wisdom, so it won't be very high, unless you focus on increasing that wisdom. Most monks focus on dex. And it targets Constitution saves, the highest creature saving throw bonus in the game on average, which is the opposite of what you want. But here's the thing, there's something in probability called binomial distribution and the law of iterated expectation. Simply put, this can be thought of as the probability of a success or failure outcome in an experiment that is repeated multiple times. We can calculate this using this formula. In our case, let's assume at level 13 you have a DC 17 Stunning Strike. Average CR 13 creatures have a +7 to their con saving throws. The chance of landing a single Stunning Strike on a single attempt may only be 45%, so the majority of the time you will fail. And the chance of landing a Stunning Strike on your next attempt will also be the same 45%. But, and this is a major but, the chance of landing a single Stunning Strike from both of those attempts is not 45%. It increases to 69.75%. Why? Because you've given yourself more than one chance to get the single result you want. What happens with a third attempt? That increases to 83.4%. 4 chances? Up to 90.8%. You see what happened there? You can take an ability in Stunning Strike that fails the majority of the time, 55%, and give yourself an almost certain chance of landing it, all in the same turn. By spending 4 key points and essentially spamming the Stunning Strike feature, you have a 91% chance to stun the enemy. Now you and all your allies have advantage to attack that enemy, without the enemy having a chance to retaliate. In addition to advantage on attacks for your Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter users, the stunned creature auto-fails both strength and dexterity saving throws. The wizard isn't going to waste this opportunity on an advantaged 3d10 firebolt, but an auto-failed lightning bolt may be worth it, especially for a high dex creature. Oh, the Swarmkeeper Ranger laid down a spike growth last turn, and the super strong enemy got out on its turn. Doesn't matter. The stunned creature auto fails those strength saving throws, so now the Swarm can just push that stunned enemy 15 feet right back into the spike growth. Go ahead and take 2d4 damage every 5 feet too. My point here is that DPR will not cover these damage increases. It won't cover the defensive and control advantages of stunned creatures. It won't cover the advantage of adding surprise rounds for the Shadow Monk or laying down the cover of darkness on enemy casters, but it's not meant to. It's meant to tell us, on average, how much damage can these builds do, and how do they stack up against each other. So how do we determine damage per round? Everyone has their own method. Triate Monk notoriously uses the extremely rigorous 8 combat day, 1 short rest, 4+ rounds of combat per encounter. Almost no one has 8 encounters per day, and even fewer tables average 8 encounters per day with a single short rest. I use 4 encounters per day, 4 rounds of combat each for 16 total rounds of combat with a single short rest between combat 2 and 3. What this means is that builds that have expendable resources, like all monk builds, immediately become more powerful when using my method as compared to Triate Monks. This is especially true at lower levels when those resources, key specifically, are so limited. I then tracked DPR at levels 5, 9, and 13 for each build using the average enemy armor class and saving throws for CR creatures at those same levels. That ended up being AC 15 for level 5, 16 for level 9, and 18 for level 13. I'll go into the specific details of how DPR was calculated for each of the 8 builds I used when I discuss them individually, but each DPR of levels 5, 9, and 13 was averaged out to determine the overall DPR for that build. Why those specific levels? Well, I didn't want to do just a full 1 to 20 spread because most builds take a few levels to get going, and the gameplay past level 13 is pretty rare in this community. Levels 5 through 13, in my opinion, gives a pretty fair snapshot of what those builds can do once they get going in those meaty levels that get played often. So let's have a look. The baseline build, an Eldritch Blast Warlock, was built a bit differently than most baseline Warlock builds. Here I used custom lineage and a half beat at level 1 to have the Warlock start off with an 18 charisma rather than the standard 16. This makes my baseline a bit higher in terms of DPR as compared to other baselines you may see out there. From here, the Warlock takes the Hex spell and Agonizing Blast and then maxes charisma at level 4. So by level 5, when we first look at DPR, that Warlock is doing 20.5 damage per round. This assumes that the Warlock doesn't lose concentration more than once because they only have 2 Warlock slots right now, and they can't afford to recast the spell more than once if they do. But that hour-long duration means the Warlock can maintain concentration through 2 combats, short rest, and engage in 2 more combats before taking a long rest. By level 9, the Warlock can't improve charisma anymore and hasn't increased the number of blasts they can do, so DPR here stays exactly the same, 20.5. By level 13, the Warlock gets a third blast, which means DPR jumps up to 28.7 for an average of 23.2 from levels 5 to 13. After that, I looked at the Pam Paladin, the Polearm Master Smiter. This Paladin is a variant human bumping strength and charisma and uses Polearm Master feat, of course, along with Great Weapon Master at level 4, and strength increases at 8 and 12 to dish out as much damage as possible. The subclass featured here is the Oath of Vengeance, primarily because of the ability to get reliable advantage for 1 combat per short rest. I also calculated DPR as if the Paladin was using a smite every single chance it gets until the spell slots run out. Obviously, don't do that in real play. Use spells like Bless, Command, and Wrathful Smite, but we're going for pure DPR here. And here we can see the Paladin does solid damage, steadily increasing from levels 5 to 13 and averaging 38.2 DPR over all those levels, which is 65% over the baseline. This is not bad at all. Honestly, it's worse than I expected, but still good. Add on all the other things Paladins can do with their spells and auras, and you can make yourself a very effective Paladin without much issue. Next, we have the Ranged Battlemaster. Here we have another custom lineage build, bumping Dex and taking the Crossbow Expert and Sharpshooter feats at level 1 and 4 to have both of those online by level 5. For the maneuvers, there are a ton of great ones, but for calculation purposes, I assume that all superiority dice would be used on the precision attack maneuver. Now in gameplay, you would only use this die if you missed, but we're still very close to a hit. For my calculations, I just assumed those 4 or 5 dice were used every time to give a flat 4.5 point bonus to the hit roll of those attacks. When used with Sharpshooter's -5 plus 10, this can be quite powerful. But it does undervalue the effectiveness of using this maneuver only when you need to. In other words, hitting with a 17, but using the die to get a 21, does nothing but waste a superiority die. Not ideal for actual play, but it made the calculations manageable. And here we see that the Battlemaster steadily increases from levels 5 to 13 with a 29.8 DPR all the way up to a 56.2 DPR. Levels 9 and 13 are right around double the baseline, and the average of 43 DPR is 85% over the baseline, so really quite good. Next up is the straight-classed, maul-wielding custom lineage barbarian. Here we take the Crusher feat to round off that strength at 18 right away, then take Great Weapon Master and a strength ASI at level 8. The Zealot subclass is good for a bit of extra damage, while Savage Attacker is also used at level 12 to give another slight damage bump. Reckless Attack will be used every single time for a consistent advantage on all attacks, and the -5 plus 10 ability is used whenever it is statistically advantageous to do so. Right out of the gate, the Barbarian nearly doubles the baseline at 38.2 DPR, and that jumps to 47.6 DPR at level 9. That's 132% over the baseline. But like all Barbarians, they don't really get much of anything between levels 8 and 20 in terms of damage, so with a maxed out strength by level 8, the Barbarian sees less than a point increase to DPR by level 13. That's tough, so if you're making this build, make sure you multi-class out before this happens. Despite leveling off, the build still averages 44.7 DPR overall, 93% over the baseline. We have 2 more builds before we get to the monks. Next up is the Pam Hexblade, another custom lineage character, this one taking Polar Master, Great Weapon Master, and eventually Fey Touch to round off Charisma at 18 by level 8. At level 12, Charisma will be maxed out. Now the strategies and calculations for this build get a bit complicated because right at level 5, the Warlock has Pact of the Blade, several invocations, and spells. The ones we're concerned with are Thirsting Blade for extra attack, Improved Pack Weapon for the attack and damage bonuses, and Eldritch Smite, which can dish out massive damage on a single target and knock that target prone. I did calculate the percent chance of this landing and knocking the enemy prone and the effect that prone enemy would have on the remaining attacks, because those attacks would be made with advantage. The Hexblade also uses Hexblade's Curse to give a damage bump and crit chance increase, but that's only once per short rest. We're assuming it lasts for the full 4 rounds of that battle for simplicity. And the spell we're concerned with is Summon Fey, right from level 5 and through level 13. One slot will be used for Summon Fey, while the remaining slots will be used for Smites. By level 13, the Hexblade gets Life Drinker, which allows the Charisma modifier to be added to the damage twice. This effectively makes Great Weapon Master's -5 plus 10 statistically inferior, so it wasn't used beyond level 12. The Hexblade's damage is incredible, starting at 72% over baseline and ending up at 171% over baseline. This averages out to an excellent 118% over the baseline. So if you want to do damage, put down the Eldritch Blast and pick up a Glaive. And our final martial build before we jump over to the 2 monk builds is the Ranger, specifically the Drake Warden Ranger. Why the Drake Warden? Well, why not? It's got a pet, and it's cool, and I know it can do pretty good damage. But I didn't know it could do great damage. The Drake Warden is a variant human that takes Sharpshooter at 1, then bumps Dex at 4 and 8. You might want to bump Wisdom at level 12, but I didn't for this build, so it maxed out at 16 right from level 1. With the longbow equipped, the Drake will help increase that damage through its Infused Strike feature, and also do its own damage as a bonus action. But the big thing here is that Rangers get spells. Really, really good spells. Summon Beast at 5 will make way to Conjure Animals at 9 and 13, and Conjure Animals is insane. And it doesn't have to break your table if you play it correctly, especially if you play online, so that's awesome. Here we can see that the Ranger does well at level 5, 63% above baseline, but then comes Conjure Animals at 9, and the doors get busted open. We're talking 369% over the baseline. That's nearly 5 times the baseline. Yes, 5x, not 4x. 100% is twice the baseline, 200% is 3 times the baseline, etc. Level 13 damage only increases by 2 DPR, bringing the overall average to 76 DPR for this build. That's 228% over the Warlock baseline, and our best comparison build for the day. And yes, my newest character is a Ranger. But how do the monk builds compare? Let's take a look. For our first monk build, I went straight Mercy Monk, almost certainly the most powerful monastic tradition, gives some good healing and damage options, along with a powerful debuff feature without an over-reliance on Ki, which is huge, because Ki can run out fast. This Mercy Monk is a half-elf, the specific type isn't really that important. This allows a bump to Dexterity with the +2, bringing that to 17, and both Con and Wisdom get +1 to 16. At level 4, Elven Accuracy rounds off Dexterity at 18 and gives triple advantage on attack rolls. For calculation purposes, we'll use Flurry of Blows and Stunning Strike twice per round. Using binomial distribution, we can calculate the percent chance of landing that stunning strike, while also using that percentage to determine the damage increase from the advantage based on attacks after an enemy is stunned. For example, if 2 stunning strikes have a 70% chance of landing at least once, all remaining attacks in the round, which is basically only our bonus action attacks, will be made with triple advantage. If the difference between advantage and non-advantage attacks is 10 points of damage, then we can safely assume 70% of that damage, which is our chance of actually having advantage. So Stunning Strike would add 7 points of damage that round. It would also add that 70% of advantage damage to all attacks the following round, and 2 more stunning strikes that next round would keep the cycle going until those keys run out. It's not perfect, but it gives a good idea of stunning strikes' impact on this one character. Again, for this exercise, including other party member damage increases is out of our scope. So how does the Mercy Monk stack up? Not too bad, actually. Better than I thought. At level 5, the Mercy Monk is just a touch above the baseline with 22.2 DPR. At level 9, that jumps to 28.7 DPR. And at level 13, it tops off at 39.5, bringing the average up to 30.1 DPR, which is 30% over the baseline for all levels. That's not great, and it's worse than all the optimized martial builds we looked at, but it is above baseline, and it doesn't take into account the Mercy Monk's 2 most important features, Hand of Harm's ability to inflict the poison condition and Stunning Strike. Let's take a look at our final build. Perhaps the coolest monk build I've personally seen, the Shadow Monk Battlemaster multiclass. This build is a half-elf drow that takes a level dip in fighter for blind fighting, and then goes 5+ levels in Shadow Monk to get 2 different ways to cast the darkness spell. Elven accuracy at 4, max dex, and eventually more levels in fighter to get action surge and Battlemaster maneuvers. I'll probably dedicate a full video to this build sometime in the near future where I'll go into more detail on the build specifics and battle tactics. So how does this monk perform? At level 5, not good. This was the only build of the 8 to fall below the baseline at any point. If you're going to be doing a level 5 one-shot, this is not the build for you. But after level 5, right at level 6, things start to pick up very quickly. By level 9, this build is nearly double the baseline. That's right, a monk build is doubling the baseline. And at level 13, it's still 63% above the baseline. That brings the overall average to 49% above the baseline with a 34.6 DPR. And this build is even less reliant on DPR than the Mercy Monk and does a ton of other things to help support the party and shut down enemies. So what did we learn? Are monks actually good? Well, when it comes to DPR, they can't really hang with the most optimized martials, especially those Gish-style melee casters. Once summoning is added into the picture, non-casters like the monk just get left in the dust. But remember, we're only talking about DPR, so if you're worried about falling behind at an optimized table, you just need to make sure your monk can do quite a bit over the baseline. Anywhere over 50% of the baseline is pretty good, especially if you're adding value in other areas of the game. Not all monk builds can do that, and most can't do it throughout their entire adventuring career, especially at those tough early levels. But a carefully built monk can do a pretty good job. Thanks for watching, everyone. You're all amazing. If you like what I do here and want the channel to continue, then please do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, share, etc. Hopefully I'll see you here next time at CMCC Builds. Bye, everyone.